has been shot. Oswald has been shot.
Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby.
Ruby came from Texas.
He runs the Carousel Club. Here is the ambulance.
More details just arrived.
Hello. Hey, everybody. Thanks for popping by on a Sunday afternoon. I'm going to dig into some more JFK stuff, but this time we're looking at Jack Ruby and why it matters, I guess, is the best way to put it. Why he matters. I mean, we all know he took out Oswald, and there's been a lot of speculation as to why that happened, and we're going to kind of dig into his past and see if there's anything there. Let me go ahead and see who else here. Oh, hey, Chuck. Welcome. Hey, Denise. Sarcasm's here. Jay's here. Looks like D. What was here. I don't know if you're still here. But yeah. So let's go ahead and dig into some of this. I'm not going to be able to follow chat and read this at the same time. So I'll try to pause periodically and see if you have any questions or, whatever. So let's go ahead and pull this up. Looks like you can see that pretty well. I might just go ahead and move maybe that way. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So, stop grabbing. Maybe too much, I think. Okay. All right. So we have Jack Leon Ruby, born Jacob Leon Rubenstein. Rubenstein, Rubenstein, I believe. He's from Chicago. So we're going to look at his Chicago roots, and we all know that was one of the things that, people pointed out, is that he was probably connected to an outfit out of Chicago. He grew up on Maxwell Street neighborhood, or in the neighborhood of Maxwell Street. It was a pretty rough area, mainly Jewish immigrants, steeped with gang activity. As a teenager and young adult, he ran errands for Al Capone's outfit, a loose-knit syndicate dominating Chicago in the 1920s and 30s, described as a street kid who scalped tickets, hustled bets, and did odd jobs for mobsters, low-level work, not really a made man, which, I guess that was maybe pretty common back then. I mean, a lot of the kids in the streets were, doing odd jobs, just trying to fit in or get along, stay in trouble, I guess. He also, a little bit later, so he gets involved in the union, worked briefly as a union organizer for the Scrap Iron and Junk Handlers Union, linked to Capone's Lieutenant Paul Needlenose Labriola. Needlenose. Gosh, I really hope that's a reference to his nose. Some accounts, like the 1947 FBI interview, suggest he helped muscle out rivals, possibly even playing a minor role in Labriola's 1931 murder, though not proven. This brushes with Chicago's labor mob nexus gave him early underworld credentials. Key figures, Sam Giancana, which I think we all know who that is. While not close, their paths did cross. Giancana's later prominence in CIA ties in the 1960s fueled speculation about Ruby's long-term mob links. And I'll go back and check in with you guys over in chat, see if there's any questions. I'm going to move this. I can't see diddly squat with that light. So I'm going to have some weird shadows. I'm hoping you can hear me. Y'all can hear me, right? I have a new microphone. Not at home, so I'm not using my usual setup. So if you can't hear me, let me know and I'll quit rambling unnecessarily. Hey, JKD Buck. Well, thanks for stopping by. No, there's a delay, so I can't tell if you can hear me or not. I guess we'll just keep going. Double check. So Ruby moved to Dallas in 1947, and the question was whether that was a mob directive. He relocated reportedly at the urging of a Chicago mob associates. His sister Ava was already here or in Dallas and running a restaurant, and Ruby joined her to manage it before shifting to nightclubs. Local players in Dallas, Ruby connected with the figures like Joseph Civello, and he was the city's reputed mob boss, had ties to the New Orleans-based Carlos Marcello syndicate. Civello controlled gambling and rackets, and Ruby's clubs, like the Silver Spur and later the Carousel Club, operated in its orbit, paying protection or navigation mob-run vice. I don't know. Witnesses say Ruby and Civello at local spots, witnesses saw them, though their relationship was casual, not operational. The nightclub years from the 1950s to 1963, Carousel Club. By the late 1950s, Ruby ran the Carousel, a strip joint frequented by cops, gamblers, and small-time hoods. Ruby visited McWillie in Cuba in 1959, officially for a week, though some claim longer, discussing gambling ventures. In 1963, operating his Dallas nightclubs, including the Carousel Club, he was known as a small-time businessman with connections to police and underworld figures, though not a major player in organized crime. There's particular phone calls that were made to Barney Baker, an ex-con and Hoffa associate. He called him on October 26th. And I may wait and go over that. Well, we can bounce back, but Louis McWillie, he called him on October 3rd, possibly about debts, or, people speculate on nostalgia, which I don't even know what that means, but okay. Erwin Weiner, Chicago bail bondsman. Sorry, that's weird screen. Can't really see with these lights. It's driving me crazy. This guy had mob ties as well. He called him on November 7th. And Nofio Pecora was Marcello's associate in New Orleans. He called him on October 30th. These calls, often brief, hinted at Ruby scrambling for money and not plotting, which I think is really interesting because how did they come to that conclusion? And this is based on information gathered from the archive. So some of this stuff is just kind of official and not really, I don't know how official the official is. Let's just put it that way. Because I think there's a lot of speculation, and you'll see more of it as we go along. Let's see. Okay, you can hear me. Good. Hey, Lady Tammy. Good to see you. Okay. Hey, Slug. All right, I'll bounce back into this. I'm glad you can hear me. So then we're going to start into sort of the timeline around the assassination. And November 21st, Ruby was at the Dallas Morning News offices in the late afternoon placing an ad for his club. He left around 4:30 and was seen later that evening at the Carousel Club. On November 22nd, the day of the assassination, in the morning, Ruby was reportedly at home when he heard about Kennedy's visit to Dallas. He didn't attend the motorcade, which, how do they know? I mean, everybody knew he was coming. There's no way he just heard it. So I don't know about some of this timeline. Around 12:30, President Kennedy was shot in Dealey Plaza. Ruby later claimed he was at the Dallas Morning News again, working on his ad when he learned of the shooting, which that was downtown. Dallas Morning News is basically right across from Dealey Plaza. So I think that's kind of interesting, and maybe put a pin in that. In the afternoon, Ruby visited Parkland Hospital where Kennedy was taken, mingling with reporters and allegedly trying to gather information. Witnesses placed him there briefly. In the evening, he was at the Dallas police station during the chaos of the Lee Harvey Oswald arrest. posing as a journalist or a translator, which I didn't see any evidence of him posing as a translator. He was seen in the crowd, but he didn't interact with Oswald at this point. And this is where my dad saw him. My dad was reporting that evening from the basement at the Dallas police station, and he saw Ruby there, which, actually led to him being called in to testify at Ruby's trial. And I do have information on the trial, but I think I'm going to keep that separate just because there's a lot of information, especially when you talk about some of the players that were involved. But I am going to take this all the way through his passing, and then we're going to look at a particular doctor that treated him while he was incarcerated, actually before he was incarcerated, before his trial. So we get to November 23rd. Ruby was observed making phone calls and visiting his club. He reportedly expressed anger and grief over Kennedy's death, telling associates he wanted to do something about it. He also attended a press conference at the police station where Oswald was shown to the media, though didn't act at this time. And this is kind of key when it comes to the court, because, if he was so volatile, he had plenty of opportunities to do something prior to November 24th, which in the morning, Ruby went downtown allegedly to send a money order via Western Union, timestamped 11:17 a.m., just blocks away from the police station. At 11:21, Ruby entered the Dallas Police Headquarters basement as Oswald was being transferred to the county jail in a split-second act. Ruby shot and killed Oswald with a .38 revolver in front of live television cameras and stunned officers. So this is the first time, anybody was ever seen pew-pewed on live television. So, that's another groundbreaking move, that happened during that weekend. I mean, it's kind of fascinating, all the little sprockets that come out off of this story. Immediately after Ruby was subdued and arrested, he claimed he shot Oswald to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the pain of a trial and to show the world that Jews have guts, which that may have been the story. It's an interesting one. I don't know. Post November 24th, Ruby was charged with murder and held in custody. His trial began February in 1964, which that's pretty fast when we look at how court moves these days. It doesn't really move that quickly. And on March 14th, 1964, he was convicted and sentenced to death. This was later overturned, but Ruby died of cancer in 1967 before a retrial. So he never actually was. I think he was released to Parkland, which we'll kind of get into that in a minute, which is kind of interesting to me that, his appeal went through, but it was, he never really got to leave. Let's see, Ruby knew. Chuck says, Ruby knew Lee, the Oswald double. He most likely did not know Harvey the Patsy. Interesting. Well, I'd like to hear more about that. Chuck, on my last stream covering this, we talked about Oswald and we talked about the double there. So it's in here. It's just we've already gone over that. I think if you wanted to go back and look at it, and by all means, you can correct anything that you didn't agree with, because I would be very interested to have that conversation. So something that I found interesting, we were talking about with Oswald, was his CIA connections or alleged connections. And we were looking at the documents that I wanted to see come out of the new JFK release. And I thought we'd just kind of stay in that sort of theme, the CIA, because we could definitely look at mob ties. We could look at potential FBI connections with Ruby. But the CIA is where I would like to kind of leave this one. And what I see is, a doctor, they called him Jolly. We'll move on over to that here. All right. So, it's jumpy. Hang on. Sorry if that makes you dizzy. Quit connecting to everything. Oh, well. So the doctor who notably examined and cared for Jack Ruby in a psychiatric capacity was Dr. Louis Jolyon West. Dr. West, a predominant psychiatrist from the University of Oklahoma School of Medicine, evaluated Jack Ruby in April of 1964 while Ruby was in jail following his murder of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, I've heard other speculations that he actually met with him while he was in custody before the trial. So it's kind of conflicting information, but again, this is some of the official documentation that comes out, and we know how we feel about that. West's examination occurred the day after Ruby attempted suicide by banging his head against his cell wall. In his report, Dr. West diagnosed Ruby with acute psychosis, a paranoid state, and suicidal tendencies, noting delusions such as Ruby's belief that a massacre of Jewish people was occurring outside of his cell, which he felt responsible for due to his actions. West recommended Ruby be transferred to a mental facility for further assessment and treatment. That didn't happen. For Ruby's physical health, particularly in his final days, Dr. Carlton Thompson, then medical student at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, was involved in his care. Ruby was admitted to Parkland in December of 1966 with the terminal illness, cancer, initially suspected to be tuberculosis, but later diagnosed as lung cancer. Thompson, who later became a gastroenterologist, helped treat Ruby until his death from pulmonary embolism on January 3rd, 1967. Thompson described Ruby as polite and grateful, though somewhat paranoid, and noticed his chest x-ray resembled a snowstorm due to the cancer's severity. This assessment was significant. It helped convince the court that Ruby's mental condition warranted reconsideration, potentially sparing him the death penalty, though he died of cancer in 1967 before his new trial. So let's move over here. Look at Dr. West a little bit. I don't know why this is... Okay, it was driving me crazy, that highlight. I'll see if you guys have any questions. Hello. Hello there. Well, he his official statement was to save Jackie from the horror of going through a trial. Ruby originally said he took out Oswald so Jackie would have to come back. I'm assuming that's would not have to come back. That's the official statement. Interviews with Ava Grant that my dad did, which you can also find on this playlist that this is on. It's the Sam Pate JFK stuff. You can go back and listen to some of that. I think it's the only audio recording of, Ava, other than some interviews that were done by the news at the time. It's a little bit longer form. Let's see. Yeah, that was very thoughtful of him, Buck. Very. Ruby was ordered to take out Oswald before he could talk. Well, and we'll get into that. There's some speculation as to that, but it's very interesting, the documents that you can find on Ruby, but there's nothing conclusive. It's just a lot of speculation, and it drives me insane because it doesn't feel like, what he was asking was he did ask to be interviewed, but he wanted to come to Washington to do it, and nobody would let him do it. And he just wasn't going to do it in Dallas. And I think he was actually very afraid of the care that he was receiving, and rightfully so. So this is right here. This picture is a photograph of Dr. West, and some researchers and theorists suggest Dr. West's visit might have been more than a routine psychiatric evaluation, pointing to Ruby's sudden psychotic break as suspiciously timed. Ruby had been assessed by other psychiatrists before West, like Dr. John Holbrook in November of 1963, found him sane at the time of Oswald's shooting, and showed no such extreme delusions earlier. West's report shifted the narrative decisively, and subsequent evaluations by independent psychiatrists aligned with his findings. This has fueled speculation that West might have used drugs or techniques from his CIA playbook to destabilize Ruby, perhaps to silence him or discredit conspiracy theories about Kennedy's assassination. So yes, guys, this is where we get into the CIA. Beyond Ruby, West's career was eclectic and controversial. He studied brainwashing during the Korean War, exonerated U.S. airmen who confessed under duress by attributing it to sleep deprivation rather than drugs. He examined Patricia Hearst after her kidnapping by the Symbionese, I'm never going to say that right, Liberation Army, finding her sane but traumatized. He also explored cults, hippies, setting up a Haight-Ashbury clinic in 1967 where Charles Manson reportedly visited, and opposed capital punishment. Ironic given his Ruby involvement. His flamboyant style earned him the nickname Jolly, and he thrived on high-profile cases. Critically, the establishment narrative portrays West as a respected expert brought in for his credentials, but his MK Ultra ties and the timing of Ruby's breakdown invite skepticism. No hard evidence proves he drugged Ruby or acted on CIA orders, as MK Ultra records were largely destroyed in 1973, which, that's convenient. Still, the coincidence of a CIA-linked psychiatrist with a history of mind-altering experiments examining a key figure in the JFK saga, followed by that figure's rapid mental collapse, keeps the questions alive. West died of cancer in 1999, leaving his full story, like much of the MK Ultra, shrouded in ambiguity. I think he's also reported to have killed an elephant with LSD. He overdosed the poor elephant. It's horrible. Let's see. Chuck says, I'm not speculating. No, I know. I understand. I'm saying that the reports that come through the archives are based on a lot of speculation, not what you're saying. Sorry if I misspoke. So I think that that's an interesting tie to the CIA, especially when you look at his involvement with other Charlie Manson alone. I mean, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we could go down at some point if you really want to. But I think the best place to start is to maybe look at Chaos. It's a really good insight into Charlie Manson, and I think it delves into the MK Ultra a little bit. But I don't know, some of the statements, if you start to think about it from that angle with Charles Manson, some of the things that he said could be very indicative of somebody who was part of a program. And these programs, I mean, initially they said there was probably 10,000 people tested or used in these programs for MK Ultra, but the reality is it's probably well over 30,000 people were involved in that, when you look at all the locations that they actually operated out of. So I think that that's kind of interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that draws more conclusion towards CIA? Are you convinced more that it's CIA, less that it's CIA, knowing that? Uncle Charlie. Buck. That's funny. So let me see if there's anything else on here that I wanted to kind of include. I think this moves into connections to law enforcement, the FBI, or the CIA. So we can kind of go into this a little bit. The mob, I don't know, do you guys want to dig into the mob stuff, or are you more interested in the alphabets? I mean, it's up to you guys. I didn't really dig into who some of these people are that he was known to operate with. I do think it's interesting that the gun running, because I think that's been corroborated several times, and I feel like that's actually more truth to that, even though it's been dismissed over time. I guess we could get into the Oswald killing and mob theories. So the motive. Ruby claimed he shot Oswald to spare Jackie Kennedy a trial, and in 1964 polygraph backed his sincerity. But who's controlling the polygraph? I mean, I don't know. I I don't think I trust those either. Gosh, I really sound like I need my tinfoil hat on. I'm sorry. I try not to do that, but gosh, they make it so hard. Mob theories suggest he silenced Oswald to protect a conspiracy. Marcello hated the Kennedys. Giancana had CIA ties, and Trafficante faced Castro losses. Ruby's access to the police basement via cops' pals and underworld contacts make this a plausible but unproven. The House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that Ruby had significant mob associations with Chicago, Dallas, and Cuba, but no evidence he acted on their behalf. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of evidence. Ruby was a mob hanger-on, not a made man. He knew players and worked their periphery, running clubs and owning debts. His Chicago youth and Dallas hustle gave him street cred, but he was a small fish, volatile, not strategic. So the conspiracy holes. If the mob used Ruby, why him? He was erratic, broke, and loud, not a reliable cleaner. His calls and Cuba trip show connections, not orders, which again, you don't know what happened. So I just think those conclusions are very bizarre to me. It's the Warren Commission and HSCA agreed mob ties existed, but they don't drive Oswald's death, which that doesn't make, I don't know. Anyway, the counterpoint, his police access and call patterns scream cover up. Marcello and Trafficante could have leaned on him informally without records. Mobs don't keep ledgers. It's circumstantial. So, there's like I said, it's excuse me, it's a lot of speculation. I mean, yes, he was in debt. He could, why did he go down to Cuba? Why did he spend a week? Why was he making those phone calls? To say that they say that it was because he needed money. And I'm like, I don't, how do you know? How do you know what happened on those calls? It's very bizarre to me. It just doesn't have the depth, I think, to really be compelling to me. Hey, Angie, good to see you. Hello, General T. Well, Jay, I hope you weren't involved. That would be very interesting if you were. So I don't know if I want to get into all of the other stuff today. I guess I can cover this section. CIA connection claims, Cuba and gambling. Ruby's his friend Louis McWillie, a gambler with ties to Havana casinos in the 1950s, worked for mobsters like Santo Trafficante, whom the CIA later approached for anti-Castro plots. Ruby visited McWillie in Cuba in 1959, allegedly to discuss gambling ventures. Conspiracy theorists suggest this trip linked Ruby to CIA-backed mob activities, but records show it was brief, a week. I mean, you don't need a long time. But again, in 1959, there was no connection to JFK, so that wouldn't make much sense. That he was down there plotting an assassination of a president who wasn't president yet. A lot of these timelines are what bother me the most. Gun running. Some claim Ruby ran guns to Cuba in the late 1950s, potentially intersecting with CIA operations against Castro. Witnesses like Rose Cherami, I'm never going to say that right either, alleged Ruby knew Oswald and was tied to a broader plot, but these stories are anecdotal and uncorroborated, which I think that they are corroborated because you have more than one witness saying there were connections. You had the waitress at the diner, you had the CIA operative, the female that was supposed to go down and kill Castro. She said she saw them together. There's just too many. That to me is enough to corroborate it. You've got, it's not just one person saying it. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, guys? CIA or nah? See, it only takes one interaction to put things in motion. Right. Again, but you can't really plan something to kill somebody who's not elected yet. I mean, I don't know. That's my thought. Anyway. certainly brings room for other reasons to the forefront. The other theories have just as many holes to allow doubt. I think there's a lot of holes in a lot of the theories, and I'm not absolutely resolute on any one theory at this point. I just think it would be nice to see the CIA files. That's all. That's all I want. I just want to see the files. So I hope those come out unredacted. That would be a major win. Is there anything else anybody else is looking for? I mean, what do you guys think? What would you like to see in these documents? And we know that the CIA was watching Oswald, but we don't really know what their involvement with Oswald was completely because it's all redacted. So building the wall, though, it's getting pretty big, I have to say. So, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more on Ruby, obviously, but this goes into the trial and the players and then some of that. And I wouldn't mind getting back into the trial itself and going over some of my dad's testimony, if anybody would want to listen to that. But I did cover it once, but it was my first live and it was terrible. It's really embarrassing. Let's see. Chuck says, sounds to me like this archive is basically the official fairy tale. This is what I want to show people what the evidence is, Chuck, not necessarily like, the official evidence. So it would be interesting if anything comes out that contradicts this. And I would, if there is, I'd like to see it. And, because I think there's something more here. And I would really like to hear what it is or see what it is. And I try not to I'm trying to connect dots. That's kind of the whole mission behind what I do. But you have to start with what's available to us. So I think it would be interesting to dig in a little bit deeper on some of these. I'd like to dig into some of these players, but as you can see, even when we started with Oswald, that spurs so many more people connected to him. And then you just take one of those people like Jack Ruby, and then you've got, a list of probably 30 more people to dig into. This is why this case is so daunting and overwhelming, and finding any information in the archives is kind of a challenge. I don't really care for the way it comes out. I don't like the Mary Farrell database. It's not my favorite. I do know somebody's trying to develop AI to diagnose. Yeah, thanks, lady. I'll try. There's somebody developing an AI to go through the documents for research, but I'm kind of wondering if we don't already have AI that can do that. Why you need your own? So I don't know. We'll see. Yes, we'll blame Jeremy's. Yeah, for sure. Oh, you're not late. Whenever you get here is when you get here. Yeah, I knew this could either be a really long stream or it's going to be, kind of brief. And I figured I'd rather break up and keep the trial on its own, and then maybe even do the mob connections on their own stream, because then we can kind of dig in a little bit deeper to who these people were without taking up too much time. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I don't know that I have a lot more prepared for today, unless you really wanted me to just read this stuff to you. But it's kind of hard when you're all by yourself because you don't have that question immediately being asked. So definitely prefer the format of having a guest on who can interrupt me and ask questions. But I do appreciate you guys coming out, and I'm going to keep going on this. I am going to, I try to stick with, strictly with stuff that I already knew, especially when I was going over my dad's stuff. So we could go back over some of that, but I would like to do the trial and go through the transcripts, especially my dad's testimony, which I thought was kind of entertaining, actually. But that's kind of where we're at. Any questions that I didn't answer about Ruby? I'll wait. Yeah, this is, God, it's it's a lot more work than you think it would be to kind of dig through this stuff and keep it simple, because it's just not simple. Context where I'm lost with Oswald. So Ruby would be that tie to Oswald. Do they have anything saying Oswald was seen with mob figures? No little guy would be seen with someone that high. I don't show any evidence of him being in contact with anybody that's directly related, except for his proximity to Marcellus in New Orleans. But even again, that there's a lot of speculation involved in that as well. There's just the triangulation is enough to make me say there's something there. But when you look at, if you go back to, I hate to keep circling back to the CIA, but when you circle back to the CIA, they have a history of using, idiots. I mean, they want their, I don't know how else to say it. Useful idiots is what I guess the term is. So yeah, there seems to be a lot of that. And I think as far as Ruby goes, my understanding from what my father took away from it was Ruby was in a lot of debt. He had to make sure this went well, and it did not go well. My dad tried to interview him while he was in jail, and he was not allowed to. I think there was only one person allowed to interview him while he was in jail, and I don't think he really shared that much. And Ava trusted my father, so that's why she did the interview with him. And it's just a recording of her interview, or his interview of her is on this playlist. So if you wanted to go and listen to it. Now, you're not going to get any insight into his connection with the mob there, but you're going to get what sounds like a family that is convinced that he was poisoned while he was in jail. He was, wasn't treated humanely or properly for his illnesses. So that's mainly what her focus and concern was on. So you can go and give it a listen if you'd like. It's worth a listen to, I think. And I just can't imagine that he would have told her anything, because ultimately then that puts her at risk, and it's better she knows nothing. So that's just my thoughts on that. His strip club was financed by the mob, correct? I don't know that that's necessarily true. His sister had the velvet jacket, and it was a dinner club that was very, it was very nice and, fairly successful. So I don't think that's necessarily true. But again, I don't know. When you had the Campeses here as well, which, Campeses are a fun one to dig into, as well as their restaurant was right across the street from a train station or a train depot. So if you wanted to get something to and from Chicago fairly easily, it was right across the street. So you could get any number of things or people or what have you to come through. I don't know. It would be interesting to look at, because the Campeses ended up owning, I would say it's probably a good 10 square miles of Dallas in that area. Let's see, Kennedy's car, the Henry Ford Museum. Is it? I don't know. That's a good question. I guess I haven't thought about that. Yeah. So that's kind of where I am. I do appreciate you guys coming by. I'm just going to try to get through these things. But when I started compiling all of this, because I wanted you to see what the stories are, what's the basic story, and then we can talk about the speculations, because I think that there's enough there that it just kind of ends with this, like, oh no, he was just a nut, or he was desperate, or blah blah blah, and volatile. They just try to discredit him as much as they could with the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And then there's also the church investigation. I mean, we could even look into the other investigations, but this is all based on basically what's in the archives, which is kind of a combination of everything. Yeah, it's this is on a playlist. I think it's called Sampate. Sampate, KBOX News, JFK. So yeah, it's also listed under podcasts on YouTube. So if you wanted to listen to everything that I've done so far, I've done a breakdown of where my dad was, and then also started breaking down another interview that he did. I just haven't finished it yet because it's rather long, and it's kind of hard to dissect all of that. And I try to do it like as like a pre-made video, so you can kind of go over and see what he said versus his testimony and what have you. But there was a lot of my dad didn't know that this thing was so popular until the 90s, and then he was a lot older. So some of his stories, I think, still have some I don't know. But I also think that he spent a lot of time with the conspiracy symposiums and things like that. So he was learning a lot of new information that he didn't have at the time. So I think that was kind of fun for him. All right. I think I'm going to call it there, guys. I do appreciate it. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. There will be more. I'm going to try to do one a month on JFK stuff so I can get everybody caught up, unless the dam breaks and we get some documents, and then that will be fun to kind of see what's in there. And I'm happy to dig through that with you guys. If there's a topic that you want to do, my goal is the CIA stuff. That's all I really care about. I'm sure other people care about other things, but I don't think there's anything new that can be found. So anywho, thanks again, and have a good day. And I'm going to redirect this over to Slug's stream. So go over there and drop him some salt shakers in his comments, please. And I'll see you guys in the tubes. Bye.
Oswald has been shot. Oswald has been shot.